Now, my freshman or sophomore year of college, I was playing Ultimate Frisbee on a Wednesday afternoon. I was on, you guys ever have one of those invincible streaks where you can't miss? You can't not catch it. It can hit you in the forehead and you've somehow caught the Frisbee. This was it. I was on fire. I had the swagger. We were stomping the other team. It wasn't even close. And what ended up happening is like a guy, I started letting it go to my head. I became that macho Ultimate Frisbee guy. Started teasing some people. And what I failed to notice, that in my pride, that I was actually straining relationships of people on the other team. That pretty much in an hour, I would be eating dinner with. My pride had skewed and twisted the relationship. Well, a friend of mine, Lene, who was on the other team, she just made a comment. She was very soft-spoken, but she pretty much tells me, as she's walking past, she's like, well, pride goes before the fall. And I'm like, ha, 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 and a haughty spirit. And as soon as I said that, and I am not joking, I stepped in one of those sort of potholes in the grass. Yeah, I stepped right into that hole. And in that split second, the relationship between me and the other team had been completely restored. I was now just human. I had been humbled. My pride, non-existent, because no matter how good I was playing, I was still human. Just like them, and I proceeded to make myself look like more of an idiot in that moment. And it was a wonderful moment as we laughed at me. Peter, as he is continuing to give his closing thoughts to this group of Christians, emphasizes humility in three major relationships. He emphasizes humility in regards to your church leaders. He emphasizes humility in your relationship with one another. And he emphasizes humility with your relationship with the Lord. And today we are going to use this idea. Today we're going to use this idea of humility. And a lot of times we'll hear humility like making yourself lower, making yourself less, and things like that. And there are aspects of that. But for today, when you think humility, I want us to think placing greater value on the thoughts and perspectives of another. So it's not that you are less than anyone. The idea is that you are making someone else's thoughts and perspective more important. Because what happens sometimes in our quest to be humble, some people have used this idea of humility as a literal way of making people feel like less. And that's not the case. It's that I am making you better. I'm still valuable. My thoughts and opinions still matter, still mean it, but I am choosing to place a greater value on your thoughts and perspectives on this. And we'll actually see how this plays out here in these verses. Now, last week we focused on how elders and leaders of the church are to treat the flock of God. You guys listened to me talk to myself about myself. That's pretty much what last week's sermon was. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 1, we'll start there. So I exhort the elders among you, as a fellow elder and as a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed, shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Now we move on to the verses that we're going to be talking today. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to your elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Now, oftentimes, probably a lot of your Bibles end right there sort of as its own paragraph, okay? A lot of the Bibles I saw, that's where they end, but the idea of humility keeps going, and that's what we're going to be emphasizing here this morning. And so it continues in verse 6. Humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. And that's what those are the verses that we're gonna talk about here today. So last week, just to recap, we said, hey, the pastor is to establish commonality with his people. He's supposed to smell like the sheep. He is to lead like a shepherd, not domineering, not smacking the sheep around, but guiding them, bringing them to. He's supposed to be up on the hill looking at the dangers coming, and also down to the time trying to encourage people to come, or the sheep to come with him. And then lastly, the shepherd is to realize that he is a servant of the great shepherd, and he is to follow his example. And so now we have verses 5, 6, and 7. And the first point here. So I thought this was a really cool name. So this is the name of my sermon this week, is humility and a pithy. And a pithy is like a little bitty creative wise saying. So we are going to talk about each of these relationships, church leaders, one another, or with God, and we are going to describe that in a pithy. Now you might listen to my pithies and say, those aren't very wise. To me, they were, okay? So just be humble and act like my opinion matters, okay? So, here we go, verse 5. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to your elders. Now, we just talked about, so, in the previous verses, those elders, they are to lead the youngers, and elders was a way of talking about those who are wise, those are experienced in the church. We equated that to the position of a pastor as those who are guiding and leading. And so now the elder is to take care of the younger. And now Peter's like, okay, now you who are younger, you are to submit or to honor, to show humility to those who are elders. Peter is not creating a hierarchy of like pastoral leadership, or elder leadership. Whoever's the oldest is leading, because, I mean, that would mean that whoever was the oldest person here in the church would be boss, which might not be a bad idea. But then that means if they were to, that means the next person would be there, and the next person, and so the hierarchy. So who's the youngest one in here? Let's see, who's the youngest? Youngest in spirit, we'll go with that, okay? So we have a couple people here. So so Francis, you are like 67, pretty much, right? Then it goes down from there, right? Am I close? Yeah, okay. So, I'm going to get it later, probably. All right, but so it would have this hierarchy. See, Peter's not establishing a hierarchy here, okay? Not like only those who are oldest. So those who in the church who happen to be older than the elder, you don't have to listen to the pastor. He's not doing anything like that, okay? What he's literally saying is if you're in a position as an elder, shepherding the flock, then everybody else by default is a younger. Okay? That's what it is. If you're an elder, you're leading. If you're not leading the flock, you're a younger, okay? So there you go. So that's what Peter's establishing here. She's like, okay, so likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Now this word subject, every time we hear the subject, it's the same word that we've seen in other parts of the Bible where it means submit. And a lot of times it's used as a blunt instrument. And so this first one is we're talking about humility in your relationship with church leaders. Elders, youngers, okay? There's a lot of similarities between youngers, submit to elders, elders, shepherd, don't be domineering over the younger, okay? That's what we talked about last week, right? Right? Just nod your head, okay, guys? Okay, even if you don't remember. All right, wives, same word, submit to husbands, and that's in 1 Peter chapter 3. And husbands, live in an understanding way. The reason why I'm spending a little bit of time of this is I was, in so many ways, within the realm of Christendom that I came from. Not necessarily my college, but we heard many examples and many stories of the proper way to be a husband was to be a domineering husband. Whether it was said or not, I'm just saying whether it was actually spoken from the pulpit or not, that was sort of this side thought that was there. Not necessarily in my college, it wasn't necessarily at the churches I went to, but you would just hear of stories. You would hear of accounts in churches that were similar to ours, where you had domineering. The idea was men domineered over the women. Women were second-class citizens, I'm sorry. It just was. That's just how it was. Now, I'm not saying my parents were like that. I'm not saying my previous pastor was like that. I'm not saying my church was like that, okay? But it's just in the realm of, I guess if you had the spectrum, and I was over on a little more conservative side, if I took one more step, I would be in that realm. That's what I felt like, okay? Now, so I'm spending a little bit of time on this in case this has been taught or communicated, etc. And so it's an easy theological way to think through how a husband is to lead his wife and how a wife is to respond to her husband without necessarily using this idea of submission and etc. Okay, so the same words are used, but youngers submit to elders. Now, it's not this, elders are the boss, I can tell you what to do, and if you're going to submit to me, you got to do whatever I want. So if I decide to tell you guys all to cluck like a chicken right now, if you're really obeying God, you must do that. I know, exactly, yeah. So it's just like, it's not gonna, you're just looking at me like, why would you do that? Why would a leader do that? But oftentimes leaders will make these grand pronouncements that if you don't follow, you're not submitting to your godly leadership. Yeah. Remember that, okay? But the thing is, elders aren't supposed to domineer. We're not supposed to make you eat your words and make you feel convicted and use guilt to wrangle out of you. Because I can make anybody feel guilty over anything. It's like my spiritual gift. The problem is I shouldn't. You know what I mean? I need to literally keep my mouth closed. If someone doesn't want to do something, I will say, well, that's a bummer. Not, well, I was praying for your soul this week, and God told me He wanted you to do what I want you to do. That's domineering. That is guilt, okay? If you ever hear me say that, I'm joking with you, okay? So I'm just telling you, all right? So, see, that is how, so elders as leaders are to guide like a shepherd and not domineer. Not under this convulsion and this guilt and this placing pressure. And then the youngers are to honor the elders and to respond, because the elders should be leading you towards Jesus. The youngers are like, all right, he's going to Jesus, we'll follow him. And there's an honor and there's a willing to go. And that's that word for submit. It's not this, I'm underneath the pastor. I'm not as valuable as the pastor. I'm not as godly as the pastor. It's none of that. It is just in the relationship, in this mass herd, somebody has to go somewhere with us. And you guys have elected to let that be me. I don't know if that's a stupid choice or a not stupid choice, okay? We'll figure it out, I guess. And so that's the idea, is youngers are to submit to the elders as the flock as we follow. Now here in the relationship between wives and husbands, wives, it's that same word, are to submit to the husbands. And husbands are to live in an understanding way. Remember the commonality? The shepherds are to smell like the sheep. There's supposed to be a connection there. Husbands, it is our job to live and to lead and to walk in a way that is understanding to our wife. So if our wife does not want to go to certain church events because people stress her out, you shouldn't guilt her into going. Well, if you were a good Christian, you better go. You know what? Let her stay home and you go. It's not going to kill anybody. It's all right. You don't have to domineer or guilt or force your wife. Let your wife make her own wonderful decisions and be her own woman, because you know what? She's probably smarter than you in a lot of areas. Let her be her. Work together in that. So it's not this hierarchical weird system there. Let her be you. You be you. You live in an understanding way with her. You don't domineer over her, guilt her, make her feel guilty, make her feel less. You should be the one celebrating, building her up, etc. That's how husbands live. So women, when you submit, don't think of this idea where I'm placing myself underneath. Think of it as, you know what? I place great value in the words of my husband. Even if maybe they're not the greatest words he's ever spoken. but I will choose to honor him. And husbands are to lead like a shepherd is to lead, walking with the sheep, smelling like her. You guys, you ever end up smelling like your wife's perfume at times? Because you decided to hug her? Or you gave your wife a kiss and she had lipstick on, and next thing you know, you got this spotch and she doesn't bother to tell you, and you end up going to work and you have this big lipstick spotch on your face? You're going to have it. That's okay. That's okay. Husbands, if your wife asks you to hold her purse, just hold her purse. Wear that sucker with pride. In our day and age, you'd probably fit right in. Okay, man, you guys are hard. You guys are a hard audience today. All right. You guys are like, am I allowed to laugh at this? Okay. All right, let's keep going. All right, so just wanted to say that. So when you guys think of submission, don't think of this thing, okay? Think of how the youngers are to respond to the elders in a system of honor, of humility and honor. Think of it in that way instead of this system. Okay, so let's keep going to verse 5 here. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Okay, so submission is dun. Okay. Now, I want to say this one thing real quick, okay? So when it comes to your husbands, it says, likewise, you who are younger, be subject to your elders. One of the biggest areas in regards to showing honor to your leaders is that of any time your pastor comes up to you and says, hey, I noticed this in your life. Maybe we should see if we can fix that. I absolutely hate going to people and talking about their sin. It is my least favorite thing to do in my job. I don't like it. And in regards to honoring and submitting, that idea of placing honor upon them, if I ever have to come to you, I'm like, hey, I heard such and such. Or, hey, I saw such and such. Or, hey, we got to stop this action here. It's up to you guys to say, hey, even if you agree or you disagree or whatever, to honor what the elders are saying. Because as you guys know me, I don't go around pointing at people's sin all day, because I would be pointing all day long at myself and at you, right? Stop it. Just stop sinning all the time. Just stop it. You know, it gets point. No, I try to pick some big ones, okay? If I'm going to go in, it's because of something noticed, and what I'm in essence doing is I'm holding up a mirror in front of you. And so if I ever have to go up and hold a mirror in front of you, try to honor what the elders are saying. I'm asking you guys, because it'll probably happen. At some point in your life, I might walk up and say, hey, you can't say that. You can't drive like that. You can't speak like that. You can't do that with, you can't. And so the biggest challenge is, in that way, honor what's the elders, because it's usually not me. I usually bring another elder with me. We talk about this, but just consider that if I ever have to come to you and hold up that mirror, honor what's going on. And so the wise Pithy, in regards to our relationship with the church leaders, is someone needs to hold the mirror for you. When you wake up in the morning, and the first thing you do after you go to the bathroom or shower or whatever is you usually stare at the mirror. And what you see is usually not the greatest thing you've ever seen in your life. I mean, am I right? I mean, sometimes your hair gets stuck up in mine does. And I have some really cool hairdos in the morning. And you just look there, and then you're like, okay, so I have a problem with myself. I have boogers here, eyes here. I didn't even know my eye could do that in the morning, all right? And you try to get adjusted, and you fix your hair, and you go, and you're on your way. That's what the pastor does. When he goes up and says, hey, I see this in your life, he's holding up the mirror there. And so the wise Pithy here is show humility to your leaders, because someone needs to hold the mirror. Someone needs to show you sometimes what you got to work on. And that poor guy happens to be the elder of your church. Let's keep going. Humility in your relationships. He says, clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility towards one another. So now he's talking about your relationship, not just with the elders, but with everybody. He says, clothe yourselves with humility towards one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. He wants them to show humility and to give other people honor. And he wants this to be a clothe yourselves with this. And Peter quotes a verse from Proverbs chapter 3, verse 34, that says, toward the scoffers he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor. James chapter 4, verse 6 is also an example of this verse being used. And he says, I want you to clothe yourselves with humility towards everybody, because God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble, which is really fascinating. When you give grace, so when you are giving favor, you are, in essence, I am giving a gift. My hands are open. I'm usually receiving you. I am welcoming. That's sort of the idea here. Now, opposition is you getting pushed back. It's like those stiff arms we see in football where the guy is almost about to tackle and the running back just places his hand right there on the helmet and just knocks the guy to the ground. And then we're all like, yeah. That's opposition, being pushed back. It is going up to give someone a hug and they knock you back. That's opposition. That is being opposed. And it says God is specifically pushing back against those who are demonstrating an attitude of pride. He's pushing against it. He showed me my pride when I was playing ultimate frisbee, and he nudged me into a hole. But here in our life, he opposes the pride, but he shows favor. So why do we want to live with an attitude of pride towards one another if God is actively opposed to it? The answer is we don't. If God is showing favor and opening his arms to that of an attitude of humility and favor towards one another, hey, that's what we should do. And that's what Peter's saying here. We need to honor and to live with humility towards one another. And he uses this word to clothe yourselves. So last 2 nights ago, Nikki and I celebrated our 7th wedding anniversary, or 7th, wow. On the 7th, we celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. Whoop, whoop. So we've been married for 10 years. That was pretty cool. And so when we're going out, we sort of went out sort of like night on the town mentality. So I dressed up a little bit more. Okay, because you're supposed to look nice, you know? And so, do I dress up nice all the time? No. I happen to have a shirt that I have had since I was a junior in high school. It still doesn't have a hole in it. I don't even know how that is physically possible. I wear that shirt when I work on cars, when I paint. Somehow it hasn't gotten ruined. I don't even understand how that's possible. It's the shirt I was wearing yesterday. Yeah, that's it. That is my high school shirt. It's like nuts. So that is my shirt. That is the shirt I wear every day. That shirt is comfortable, feels nice. Do you guys have one of those shirts? Come on, guys. I know we're far more likely to have that shirt that's been around the block a few times. Okay, so we have that shirt that we feel nice in. So this next thing, when we think of humility in regards to one another, humility towards one another is not a night on the town, but it's wearing your favorite shirt, because we don't wear our favorite shirt all the time. So showing humility is not a one-time thing with each other. You guys would have no idea. I was humble one time with somebody this week. You guys would be like, so what were you all the other times? Okay, see? It doesn't fit. Humility is the idea of when you think of clothing yourselves with humility, it is wearing your favorite shirt. You know, like kids like to wear their boots that like doesn't matter if they sleep in or they go out to anywhere. You know, for boys, it's usually like a pair of red fire boots or something goofy. They just wear it all the time. That's what humility should be. It is that pair of clothing that we never, ever, ever want to take off, because it is just who we are. It is comfortable. It has perfectly shaped around all of our curves, everything. Okay, it is just that I have this shirt broken in. Even though somehow it keeps getting shrunk in the dryer, it still fits me. It's that shirt. That is what humility is. It's not a one-time thing. It is a lifestyle of wearing our favorite clothes. It is something we have to do all the time. And so he says here, clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. So what does this look like in our life? We talked about what it looked like in the life of a pastor. When he comes and has to say something to you, show him some honor. Listen to what he has to say before you react. But what does it look like with each other? One of the biggest areas that we can honor the perspective of somebody else or listen to them and to honor their values and their perspectives and show that they mean something is listening to one another. You have no idea how, I think listening is a trained art form. Because when it comes to other people, so rarely we will actually listen to the heart of what they are saying. We will react to the words they are saying. None of us can communicate perfectly. We can't. We can't do it. There are times up here in the pulpit, I have probably said stuff where I didn't exactly mean how it came out, but it came out. We have to listen to people before we react. Really listen. And if that means you have to wait a few times to actually get the idea of what I'm saying, then that is better than lashing out against somebody because you heard a few words that triggered you. We are so good at being triggered. It's just, ugh. It's not just colleges that do it. Society does it. We cannot handle people who disagree with us. We can't even listen. We freak out, we lash out, we attack, we oppose, we go. So in showing honor to one another, it's not just being nice to each other, not opening the door. It's when they have an opinion and they're sharing it with you, shut up and listen to the whole thing. Ask about 100,000 questions to make sure you understand it. And if you disagree, you don't have to tell them. You're like, I never heard that view before. And move on with your day. It doesn't matter, really. There's so many things we take giant stands on that's just goofy. And then when you talk about that person, so let's say you talk about me, okay, to one of your friends, and you're mad at me or something. Make sure you accurately represent what that person is saying, not twisting what they're saying to make it sound worse than it is. That's a system of honor. Make sure you accurately represent who they are because you actually spent time getting to know and listening to them. And if you find that, I will tell you guys with confidence, if you listen, and if you are a Republican and you stop for a minute and listen to a Democrat explain why he has the views he does, you will find that almost at the basic core level, you agree in many areas of what they are, and vice versa. I'm serious. Trump supporters share a whole lot in common with Bernie Sanders supporters. If people would shut up and just listen. That's what we need to do in the church. Stop talking and just listen to that person, even if you think their views are absolutely out of control. Because I've heard some wild views here in our church. You know what? Okay. Who cares? Show humility and honor towards people. That's one of the biggest ways. Now this last one. It's humility in relationship to your God. Verse 6. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all of your anxieties on him, because he cares for you. Humble yourselves to the mighty hand of God. You guys ever play like arm wrestle with somebody? Somebody you probably shouldn't have played arm wrestle with because they're far stronger than you are? And you're being humbled under the mighty hand of God. That's what it is. Don't fight against God. Just say, yeah, God, you win. Because there's no point in competing. You just beat me. It just happens. Humble yourself. He says, humble yourselves under God's mighty hand. So Peter establishes, hey, God's here, his mighty hand. We have no reason to fight against it. God is worth being under. He has a mighty hand. He is strong. So at the proper time, he may exalt you. Now, he goes back here in that verse 5. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Giving grace is showing favor. That's what it's saying here. So humble yourselves, because God opposes those who are proud. And let God, at the right time, build you up and gives you favor and lifts you up. Let God do that. Because you'll try to, in your own manpower, get as high as you possibly can, and you'll be burning every bridge behind you. You'll treat people like garbage as you move up the ladder, and as you go, and you'll be up here standing on top, and you'll realize, wow, all I've done is ruin relationships, constantly living in my pride. Let God bring you up, because when God brings you up, it's not on account of all the people you've run over. When God builds you up, there's usually a whole lot of other people he's built up alongside you. It's great. Let God build you up. Let God bring you up. Let God and his mighty hand lift you. Don't fight God. Let him lift you up. Casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. And this is why we get the definition of humility that we're talking about here. So I told you humility is valuing or placing greater value on the thoughts and perspective of another. God cares about your silly, little, puny prayer requests. You guys are like, but my prayer request isn't silly. It's a big thing for me. Yeah, but we're talking about God of the universe here. See, there's the planet Earth and the speck, and then the universe is this bajillions of light years. I mean, that's God. And here's you. Technically speaking, how big is your problem? Come on, how big is it? It's small, okay? It's tiny. It's tiny to the awesome, incredible power of God. We just gotta be honest. But you know what? God is showing you honor by listening to your puny little prayer requests. He is showing you humility by listening to you and your anxieties. You guys think about that. We look back at our own anxieties and we think they're stupid. We're like, why did I freak out about this? Everything's taken care of, but we freaked out. We were all tense. We were stressing out. Oh man, my kid fell and hurt his arm. He probably broke his arm and now he's gonna get cancer. And then he doesn't have anything. That's for you, Seth. But that's, I'm not saying Barbara doing that, but I'm just trying to, I'm not saying Barbara did that, okay? I'm not saying Barbara was freaking out. But the fact is, we'll freak out over small stuff. And then after we get through, we look back and we're like, oh, that was dumb. I wasted how much sleep on that? Wow. That was silly. We even treat them silly. But it says, give your anxieties, give your cares, casting them all on God. Because he cares for you. God is showing you humility by listening to you and what your needs are. He's given you enough time so you can cast all your cares on him. So this is the last pithy for this. Okay, we're going to build this up. So God's realm is this big, giant blue circle, okay? I've used this illustration before, but it's good to drive home, okay? So this is God's realm. We think our realm is this big, okay? But really our realm is like this big. I know, you can get like teeny little zud, okay? But here we go. So we're going to go with this, all right? So God is like, hey, this is what I expect of you. This is what you need to concern yourself with. Get up in the morning. Brush your teeth, please. Shower. Treat your wife with respect. Love on your kids. Go to work a hard day. Love one another. Come back home. Make sure you eat. Probably don't eat too much. Go to bed. Repeat. Pretty simple expectations. God's given us he's given the church very few things. He's told us one simple thing. Just love each other. And we're like, no, I don't want to. Just one thing, okay, guys? I got one thing. Just love one another. I don't want to. And we fight them constantly, okay? We can't even do the one thing right. All right, and God's like, okay. So what we like to do, though, in our life is we like to play around in God's area. Well, what happens tomorrow? What could happen tomorrow? Have any of you guys yet been able to look into the future and figure out what happened tomorrow? Because if you can, I want to meet you. Okay, you can't. None of us have any idea what's going to happen. We have no idea what's going to happen in an hour. One of us could trip over a table and make the whole food come crashing down on us. Nobody would have expected that. But it could happen. We have no idea. We can't control. We can only control ourselves right here, right now. Right now. Right now. Right now. Because it just keeps moving. That's it. We can't play in any other realm, but we like to. And we like to worry about tomorrow. We like to worry about other people's circles. We like to freak out. So we like to play out here. So in regards to the last pithy, in regards to a relationship with God, stop playing God and let God be God. Okay, that's pretty much what it is. Because stop playing God. We can't. I can't worry about what's going on tomorrow. I can't worry about what's going on in the future. No, in God's relationship, when it comes to our humility, we have to realize I am just human. I'm probably not the best human ever. Okay, scratch that. I am not the coolest, awesomest human ever. I might be second. But I'm not the coolest, okay? Show my humility there. So we do this. So God, I barely have control over my own life. I'm barely holding on, Lord. Because at a moment's notice, something drastic can happen and everything I've saved for, everything I've worked up for is gone. That house you bought off, that house you paid for, all it takes is an act of God. And suddenly things become really complicated and all your money, your investment's gone. All it takes is one bank crisis and you've lost your retirement. It just happens in the blink of an eye. It just happens so quick. So God, I am a frail person. I barely have control of, I barely am making it through day after day. But God, you care about what I hear, about what I'm saying. And you care about my silly little request that here in a few days I'm going to look back and realize I shouldn't have been worried about that at all. But God wants to hear what's going on. And so when it comes to our humility with our God, thing is, let God be God. Stop trying to play in that realm and just give God your cares and your anxieties because he has shown you humility and he is listening to your cares. What a powerful statement. What an incredible example of humility is God cares for your anxieties and your fears and your worries. It just really blows my mind. So our relationships, a relationship with our elders. Remember that someone needs to hold the mirror for you. Show him honor. Humble himself to what he has to say at times. Second one, in a relationship with each other, remember that humility is not a one-time event, but it is wearing your favorite shirt over and over and over again. It is a lifestyle that has to happen between one another, of placing honor in what another person says and does and their perspectives on what they value. And lastly, stop playing God. In our relationship with God, stop playing God. Let God be God and just bask in his humility. I mean, he's on our level listening to us complain about things that he has figured out already. Whoa.